Good evening and welcome to Blue Dream Love and Wellness. This is webinar 148, and we are very honored tonight to have Amy to come and talk with us about the human design. With our human design, remember, everybody is so unique and so different by our dates of birth, by the time we were born, and where we were born. So if we are not living in our accordance to our strategy or our authority, our mind is going to be our personal slave driver, more to speak. But if you surrender to the actual wisdom of this genetic purpose, it unfolds quite naturally and beautifully for all of us. And if you could even fathom that it would fall into line like that. But this is your gift to surrender to life's intelligence. And tonight we were honored to have Amy come and discuss this with us. She is very key in this and has been working this for a while. Amy, so welcome to have you. It is our honor to have you here with us.
Hi, thank you. It's so good to connect with you.
Thank you. Can you tell us, how long have you actually been doing human design?
Oh geez, I think as we get into this field and this realm of energy work, we just start absorbing and taking on as much as we can. So I would say I started really getting into the depths of it probably about a year ago when I added it into my own practice.
Mm-hmm.
So,
and what got you started into this?
I think just like a lot of stuff, I ran across something, and kind of for me, I was always looking for the sort of like, how do I stay balanced? Like I could help myself get into a place of balance and help my clients get into a place of balance, but it always seemed like there was this fighting yourself. And so when I ran across human design, I think it just was one of those things that, how certain things just resonate with us, but it just clicked for me because I was like, wow, this is all about accepting myself for who I am instead of trying to figure out how to change the fact that I feel like I have attention deficit disorder or whatever you want to label it as, or, change the fact that I'm just opinionated or whatever, or some people really just get caught in cycles where they just get so frustrated because they just don't have willpower. So instead of fighting yourself, you just realize that, okay, that's my human design. So instead of being angry or upset with myself because I don't have any willpower, you learn how to access other people to bring that you basically kind of are borrowing their energy. So you find someone that's really got strong willpower, and then you can sort of feed off them instead of just fighting and trying to figure out, because you're just go in a circle and you'll never get there because you're just not born with that.
Right. And a lot of people never get it and look at us like we're wonkers because we do this work.
Right.
So I actually printed mine off today, and I suppose I left it downstairs. It was very interesting. It a little confusing, but there's so many steps to it. So which step is the most important, or do you stop up at the top and go down, or where do you even begin?
So in the presentation that I have that I can share with you, I kind of go through like the upper level and trickle it down so you can kind of see how it all works.
And how different is it? Because we've had the gene keys on here. How different is it from our actual gene keys?
I can't really speak to that just because that's not kind of my area of expertise. Compare the two. I mean, I've gone into some familiarity with when people ask me, like, what's the difference between just getting into your astrology or your birth chart. And this just goes into a lot more depth. I like to think of it as, because most people are really familiar with like their zodiac sign. That's something that we grow up around, and all of us are taught about it. But there's only so many zodiac signs, and definitely there's more flavors of people than the zodiac signs that we have. And if you're like me, you'll read one, but then you read another and you'll be like, well, there's stuff about this other person that totally resonates with me. So I say human design just takes it down to just another level. I like to think of it as and I'll show you, it's almost like making soup. Like you start at this really high level with like the base of the soup, but then we start adding like all this stuff. And by the time you're done, you have this very unique, beautiful flavor that's just you.
Oh, that's awesome to say it like that. That resonates well. Awesome. Well, let me share my screen with you for you can do your presentation. top. There we go.
Right. Here's the hard part is figuring out how to, okay. So let's see. Let me just make sure that I get all this right. There, I think, here we go. Okay. You just have to tell me if I'm sharing the right one.
Okay. You've got a test tube there. It's cool beans.
Perfect. So you can see my test tube and we're in the right place.
Awesome.
I literally have my computer set up like a command center. So, you know.
Oh, well, that's great. We all need to do that, don't we?
Takes me back to my military roots. Okay.
Uh-huh.
So, as she mentioned, my name is Amy Jorgensen, and I love human design. I have a background, a master's degree in education, and this is something that I do as my purpose and my passion. I also have a corporate job, but this is really where my heart lies. Like, it's so exciting to watch people have these amazing breakthroughs. So I'm going to show you how human design works, because if you do go and get your human design chart, and I'm happy to run that for anybody if they want one. You can go online and get them. The problem with some of those is that, of course, like anything, it's a marketing thing, right? So if you go to somebody's website and they're like, oh, we'll run your chart for free, they'll run your chart for free, but half the time you can't understand it. So just the software system that I have gives you a little bit more details as to what you're actually looking at, but we'll go through this and I'll show you some of like the higher level stuff. And it is kind of like trying to learn, you know, calculus in an hour period. There's a lot to it. And so I'm going to break it down to make it really digestible so you can understand it.
Beautiful.
So,
I love that photo. That's beautiful.
Thank you. I know I had fun with that one. Okay. So here's kind of, we're just going to look at this really big picture. So the thing about human design is that it's going to help you to figure out and unravel exactly what your specific purpose is, because we tend as a culture to try to put people into a specific, we like to call it putting people into a box. So the thing that resonates with me is that if you go watch coaches or whatever, right? Half the time, what they're always drilling into your head. You need to take action. The reason you're not getting anywhere is because you're not getting off the couch. You're not taking action. If you would just take action, yada, yada, yada. And they put it into this really big, like everybody should just fit into this. And that's not what it's about. It's not about walking into a room and being the person that is able to come to life and confront people or whatever. Human design is completely opposite. It's learning who you are so that when you walk into a room, you're comfortable with exactly how you should be. So for example, I was always taught, you know, speak up, get out of your comfort zone. I learned to actually really dislike that phrase. Get out of your comfort zone does not work for everybody, but yet we teach it so much. And so for my human design, just to give you an idea, is that when I walk into a room, I'm an observer. And so I have to walk into a room and I'll go off to the side and I'll listen and watch what's happening in the room. And then I will be able to tell who in the room do I want to engage with energetically, who in the room is worth my time, who in the room is going to benefit me. And I'm a listener until the specific situation arises where it's time for me to speak. And that might not even arise at all while I'm in the room. So before I would dislike myself for that, because I looked at it as, man, I have really bad social anxiety. And then I realized, no, that's not what that is. That's my own inner GPS system saying, go into the room, observe and see where it's safe for you to expand your energy or connect with other people. It's a safety net for me. And so now I realize that, wow, this is aligning me with who I am. Like, this is a beautiful thing that I walk into a room and I feel uncomfortable if I don't observe first. And so that's why it's so cool. You basically create this strategy. It quiets your ego. Now, when I use the word ego, I'm not talking about oh, I think I'm better than anyone. I'm talking about your ego as your conscious, your ego, your conscious mind. So that's the one that, say that, you know, I go to think, I have this thought come to my head. Do I want to go on a vacation to California? Immediately, I have an intuitive type of a feeling or a response that comes. But I tend to not listen to that because as a child, I've been told to really shove that down. And so then it's my cognitive mind that kicks in, and it's going to start saying things like, let's say intuitively, I didn't hear it, or maybe I slightly did, but I get a yes, like I do want to go to California. But then my ego is going to kick in, and my conscious mind is going to start saying, do I have the money to go to California? Do I have the vacation time to go to California? What am I going to do with my kids when I'm in California? Who's going to feed my fish? That's the cognitive mind that comes in and wants to give you all the buts.
Right.
And so then we shove away our intuitive part. We shove away the subconscious, the inner voice. And so this strategy that we talk about, it's allowing us to quiet the cognitive mind so we can actually hear what's resonating with us. So then when we do that, you're able to just basically, as crazy as it sounds, you're living effortlessly. There's just no resistance there because you're following the strategy, and you know, and you trust yourself, and you can hear the yes and the no's. And I'm going to talk about that more, exactly how you hear your yes or your no, because it's a little different with everyone. But basically, we're clearing away all those layers of life conditioning. We're clearing away those things that people have taught us that are not so great about ourselves, that we've learned to take as a belief that really just aren't true. So we're clearing away all those. Here's the kind of origination of it. So in 1987, it was channeled. If you haven't dove into the world of quantum energies and how all this works, it's a great place to be. Really high level can be another thing that I teach on to try to make it a little less confusing, because it's very high level and your little brain gets kind of wrapped around it. But he's on a sabbatical. I like to say channeled in, if you ever had just one of those moments where you feel like you're downloading something amazing and you're just so excited about it. But basically is how this works is, and this is the part that I love, is that later, this amazing thing is actually proven by science. So I love those moments where it's like somebody has something happen and everyone's like, this person's crazy. And then later science is like, no, actually we can see that that's actually really happening. So there's these cool little things called neutrinos, and they're basically these little mass particles. And they're small enough to move through anything, but they're big enough that when they do move through something, they pick up just a tiny bit of information. So I like to think of it like, if you accidentally rub your car onto another car, have a little oops, you barely touch it, but you can still see that little bit of paint that just from them touching. That's kind of how these work. So these pick up what we call planetary energy. So they're all over the place. They're going through the galaxy. They go through planets and they pick up energy. Kind of like an imprint from things that they pick up. And so then when our cute little baby bodies are born, our conscious awareness is undeveloped at that point. And you basically have the ability to be impressioned by whatever neutrinos are there at the moment that you're born. So we're combining our DNA, our genetics, all that stuff, our ancestral things, but then we're also imprinted. And it's more than just where the planets are for your zodiac sign, because we're talking about, this is the actual energy of the planet in these little neutrinos. And that's how it creates your chart. And so it's a combination of things, lots of energy things from the I Ching tree of life, chakras, and astrology. It kind of meshes them all together to create this beautiful chart, which I'll show you in a second.
Okay.
Now, the other thing.
May I ask, what exactly is the Kabbalah and the I Ching? Is that what you call it?
Mm-hmm.
What are those, just a deeper level of this?
So think of those as like, those are just ancient philosophies, different methodologies, just like chakras, just like astrology, that you can study their, we can go into depths, but they're just basically ancient, different methodologies for, just energy work, all the stuff that we get into.
Okay.
Now, the other thing that you're going to notice is that above and beyond just the 7 chakras that most of us talk about, you're going to see that human design incorporates 9 centers, similar to chakras, but there are 9 of them. And the reason for this is that there was a progression in 1781 with a planetary shift. And when this happened, Saturn went into a Uranian return cycle. And the way that I like to think about this, because that can be kind of really out there trying to understand that, is I like to think of it this way. You look at human beings, we've evolved physically, dramatically, we've evolved. So it would only make sense that energy wise, our energy centers have also evolved. And so this is just a shift that happened where we now consider ourselves to be higher level. You can think of it as just an energy shift where we're 9-centered beings instead of 7. And I'll show you what those are. So we'll go into these. Let's see, I'm just trying to follow my screens here. So we're going to talk about these. These are, like I said, it's kind of like the soup. So we each start with a broth or a cream base. Everybody's different. And we're going to talk about layer by layer how these work. So we have things called types in human designs. We have also got our authority. That's how we make decisions. Types is kind of like your strategy. It's a little bit like your personality type. Don't try to like really overlap those, because it's the easiest way that I can explain what it is, but I'll show you what they are in a second. And then we have our authority. That's how we make decisions. So that one I really love. And the cool thing about human design is, like, after tonight, you'll be able to take type and authority and you can start constructing how you should do things. And then we just go into deeper levels, because then we have centers. This is the energy that you radiate out, or it's the space where you can absorb energy from other people. Now, the cool thing about this is, and it makes complete sense when you start looking at yourself, these things don't change. So that's why I'm saying, like, we try to do all this stuff where we try to be, the person that goes out there and gets out of our comfort zone. If your center for that isn't defined, that's not a good spot for you to be. Now, can you do it? Yes, but you can only do it if you're around a person who happens to have that center that is defined, because then you're basically absorbing their energy, which we all know, right? Can be a little bit, you want to be careful whose energy you absorb. So it allows you to also see, like, ooh, I need to be careful around certain people that are defined in this way, because I'm going to absorb the energy from them. So we'll talk about that more too, but and it's really cool, because if your center isn't defined, you would almost think, oh, if I don't have a defined center, that must be, at least for me, I was like, that must mean that that's like kind of like a less than. If a person has a center defined, if mine isn't defined. But it's actually opposite, because if your center isn't defined, it means that it's very flexible. So you can actually modify that center, whereas a person who has a defined center, like, that's just who they are. They can't change it. So I'll show you that in a second. Then we also have gates. This is going down into like the spices, the seasonings of your soup. So gates is our personality flavor. And then we also have things that are called channels, and they're just really, really the fine components of human design.
That's
all right. So we're going to talk about the types first. So this is going really to the highest level. So, like, think of them as the broth of your soup base. They also have what you're going to hear me talk about: not self themes, strategies, and signatures.
Okay.
And so let's see what this looks like here. We have manifestors, generators, manifesting generators, and we also have projectors and reflectors. All right, so I couldn't remember how much I went down a slide. So each one of these types is going to be slightly different as to how you should respond to stuff. And I'm going to show you that in a little more depth, but I'll give you some examples. So a manifestor is a person who, just like it sounds, manifests things. So thinking about this back culturally, it's really easy to see. Manifestors are the people that were our emperors, our kings, our queens. They're the people that are sitting ruling, okay? Because the emperors and the kings and the queens, and they're not the ones actually making it happen, right? They're not taking action. They're just saying, I want you to go to war with whatever. And so that's what a manifestor is. A manifestor is a person who can manifest something to happen, but they don't necessarily have the ability or the energy to take the action. Now, keep in mind, as I tell you each of these, if you think about it, if all of these people do exactly what their authority or their type is, we all fit together very perfectly, because the manifestor manifests, the generators make it happen. And that's how we're meant to work. So if we were to all live our perfect human design, we all fit on top of each other's energies just perfect, and we would all just live in this beautiful peace and harmony place, but we aren't doing that. So manifestors manifest. Generators are our people who they are the ones that provide the energy to make stuff happen. So generators would have been in the past, they would have been all the people, they would have been the people building the pyramids. They're the actual workers getting it done. So in the past, manifestors have been the people that have been ruling the show, and the generators were working. And then we see a shift because now we don't like people over us in places of authority. So generators have started coming up, and manifestors have sort of lost their way a little bit, because with technology, generators have the ability to do so much that they've literally taken on the show. So we've had this huge shift. And then a manifesting generator is just like it sounds. They're both. So they're a person that manifests something to happen, but they also can make it happen. And then we have projectors and reflectors. And projectors and reflectors, they're kind of on, especially reflectors, they're really, really uncommon. The reflectors are, and projectors are also, and I'll talk about those in a minute too. Most people are going to be manifestor generators or manifesting generators, and I'll show you a little bit more about those in a second. So then we have authorities. So on top of the fact that you have a specific type, you have what we call an authority. And these correlate with your type. But this is how, if you're following your human design, you can really tap into knowing what kind of decision that you should be making. So this is probably one of my favorite parts about human design, because it can be so stressful when you're making decisions. And I am a very compulsive person by nature, and I would get myself so wrapped up in trying to make a decision, and I would think that I made the decision and I would know what I would want to do, and then 5 seconds later I would be wrestling with myself whether or not I made the right decision. So since getting into human design, I now don't do that anymore. And in fact, it's almost comical, because I'll have someone say, like, just recently, I told somebody, I was like, oh, I'm doing this. And they're like, that sounds incredibly crazy. And I was like, totally, right? It does. But I have a zero fear to do it, because I know from my authority that the decision that I'm making, I have zero resistance. I have no doubt that this is what I'm supposed to be doing. Even to an outsider looking in, it looks completely chaotic. To me, it's very peaceful and calm because I listen to my authority. So these are the different centers that I mentioned, and I'll tell you how each of them kind of works. So people with a solar plexus authority, they're living on what we call an emotional wave, because our solar plexus is in our energy centers of human design. It's very attached to our emotions. And so what that means is, if someone asks me a question, and we're just going to use a really simple question for an example with all these, I'm going to use the example of, let's say that I have a potential to change my job. And so if I have the potential to change my job and my solar plexus is my authority, I'm going to resonate with that question of whether or not this job is a good move for me. Now, we all know, and I really don't like this little exercise, but it's what I was taught as a kid, and it never made any sense to me. But I now understand why it didn't make sense. But right, you ever have people that are like, draw a line down the center of the paper and put the pros and the cons, and then you write the pros and you write the cons. To me, that really messed with my mind, because I was like, these are not equal weights. Like, this con does not weigh the same as this pro. And so it really was difficult for me to use that system, but it works well if you're a solar plexus, just because you can see it. So is what you want to do is not necessarily looking at the paper endlessly trying to decide which side of the paper weighs more than the other, but the solar plexus emotional wave is thinking about taking the job and letting yourself feel all the lows of anything that you feel that you resonate that's negative with that, and letting it come. Like, we don't resist this. We're just like, okay, I want to feel all the feels, all the negative of what happens when I take this job. I'm feeling all the negative. And then you kind of can get to a neutral space, and you'll be like, okay. And then you're going to go to the high, and you're going to feel it all. You're going to feel all the positives. I'm going to make more money. I'm not getting along with my coworkers, so this might be a great chance for me to build new relationships, whatever that is. And you let yourself go through the emotional wave. And then you recognize that you wait until you're back at the center. And then you ask yourself the question. You feel really neutral. You're not really feeling the high. You're not really feeling the low. You feel kind of neutral because you've gone through it all and you've ran it all. I like to think of it as like the hamsters running on the wheel. You've ran through it all, and then ask yourself the question again, because you learn to make the decision when you're in that feeling of neutral space, not when you're feeling really high about it, not when you're feeling really low, right in the neutral. And that is how you learn to make your decision when you're a solar plexus authority. The sacral authority, this one is something that we teach our kids to stop doing. But when I tell it to you, it's going to make complete sense. So as a child, if you ask a child, let's say like 3 or 4 years old, they're, not fully developed in speaking, but they're really, able to communicate. If you say, do you want a grilled cheese? They're going to respond and tell you, uh-huh, or uh-uh. And then usually as adults, we say, oh, you need to use your words. You say yes or no. We don't say uh-huh or uh-uh. That's not proper grammar, right? And so we teach our children to stop listening to their sacral, because your sacral actually has a vibration energy, and it is voiced out of you as a uh-huh or a uh-uh. And if you're not sure, you'll get a hmm. And that's how your sacral communicates, but we just shut it off. And so you can turn it back on, just like anything. You start practicing, you start listening to it. And so it's what you do is I like to call what bouncing questions off people. I actually did this a few months ago. My boss was leaving and his job was open. And at first, just because of the type of personality driven that I am, I was like, oh, I got to apply for his job. Like this is a natural progression step. Like on paper, it looks perfect. I've been at the company long enough. I'm just going to bounce right into his position and I'm going to apply for this job. And I was really gung-ho about it. And then I had to step back and be like, okay, but what is my sacral really saying? And I was getting a little emotionally involved in it. And I was having a hard time hearing my uh-huh or my uh-uh. And so what I did was I set up a meeting with him and I bounced my idea back off of him. So I talked to him and I said, okay, tell me all the things about your job that you think I'd be good at, or give me some feedback about what you're seeing. And then when he was done, I had him ask me, I don't remember exactly how I reframed the question, but I had him ask me, so Amy, do you think that you still are interested in this position? That question to me allowed me to hear my uh-huh or my uh-uh. And it was really quite funny because he asked me the question, I immediately heard uh-uh. And I was like, that's it. I'm done. Nope. And so I told him, I was like, no, I'm not. And he was like, what do you mean? No, you're not. You just sat in here for an hour acting all interested. And I just told you all about it. How would you suddenly go from talking about it all week to suddenly you're just like, no. And I was like, I just know it's not the right decision for me. And I was able to leave his office being completely calm without that because before in the past, I would have had this like nagging, no, you have to do it. You have to do it. You have to do it. Cause I was really bad at, walking away from things because I always was challenging myself. And so it was great to just like hear that resonate, be like, nope, it's not the right step for me. So that's how the sacral works. The spleen, if you're a spleen authority, it's instinctively, it's really coming from your stomach. It's that knot that you feel, or that beautiful kind of like joy that you feel. It's coming directly from your gut feeling. So the thing with that one is when someone asks you, or you're in a situation to make a decision, you have to listen to it right away because it only speaks once. And then it doesn't do it again. It's not very forgiving for repeating itself. So that instinctive feeling that you have is the one you need to listen to. And once again, you'll see with all these, one of the problems is the cognitive mind's always there. It's always there getting in the way. It's always trying to talk you out of it because what does it do? It's programmed, and we enforce that program to try to keep you safe. And so it never wants to allow you to go into a space of anything that is new, because that is unsafe. It doesn't care, and it doesn't matter that every place that you're pulling yourself back to is a space of yucky, negative emotions. Because when we initially have that fight or flight, we release adrenaline and we get really hooked on it. And so our cognitive mind's always trying to go back to that like natural high, even though it also comes with all this icky emotions. It's just trying to get its fix. And so it's always going to try to keep you back in the spaces that you've been in before. If you have your will center, it's literally what you say. Those people just blurt stuff out. So if somebody asks you a question, it's going to be right what comes out of your mouth. Polarity center people, they actually have to reframe the question and ask themselves, will this really make me happy? And then environment, that's what it sounds like. It's sensory information. And then we have people that are in, I put this list the same as the types. As we go down it, these people are more and more in common. So the moon pattern, those are people that actually have to wait out the entire cycle of the moon because they need the energy and the different pattern to think about all of the different options. And then once the cycle is over, then they can comfortably say, okay, the yes or the no that I'm feeling is actually the one that's right for me.
Awesome. Now, will everybody, well, not everybody, but I mean, do most people have some of each one or no?
No, you will have, when you run your chart, you will have a specific authority. It doesn't mean that these other centers aren't defined for you and that they can't play a part in it, but you will have one that is your specific authority.
Okay. Okay.
So yeah, if you, like for mine is the sacral, but everybody's is going to be one of those. And every human design software system is going to tell you what your authority is.
Okay. Okay.
Not to say that some of these don't others, because if you haven't defined any of these, they're going to play a part in things. It just goes kind of more into the flavor of your life though, not so much on this higher level. So these are all of the different centers that authorities are connected to. And it also depends on where in your chart you have active, what we call channels and gates.
Okay.
And I'm going to show you. So just really high level. And I might have to pull up. I can't remember if, well, I'll come back to it if I don't remember if I stuck it in here, but so gates, there's 64 gates. Gates also connect to our DNA, our little DNA helixes, but these are individual little attributes and they're actually an electromagnetic connection to others. So I'm going to find a human design chart and show you in a second. So just keep that in mind and I'll show you on a higher level here in a minute. But if you have an active gate and another person's gate is not active, you will be magnetically drawn to their energy because we are all in essence trying to complete our human design and make it so that it's completely active. And we do that by connecting with other people. So let's take a look at channels. Those go even further. I'm going to only touch on these because they're very, very intricate. I can't even speak, but I'll give you an example in a second to show you like how in depth these go. These are really fine components of your being. Some of them you're going to be aware that you do, and some of them you are not aware that you do. These are the types of things that other people point out to you because they see it. It's very obvious to them, but a lot of times we deny that we do this. And so that's what our channels are. Okay, here we go. Now we're going to go into the actual, there we go. So we're going to go and look at this because this is what you'll get when you do your chart, and it's called the Rave Mandala. And so all of these components that I just talked to you about, they're actually encompassed into this little diagram of this person. And so these shapes, the bigger shapes, they're all the centers that I talked about. And so when you pull your chart, you'll see that some of these are going to be colored in for you and some of them are going to be white or open. Really, really resonate with. There is not one that is better than another as far as the being colored in or being open. This is coming from your inner child being taught that colored in is better than open. It's just something that we collectively do. It's full, so it must be better than the empty ones. So anywhere in your chart where you have one of these colored in, these spaces are defined. And these centers are always, always there as a reliable source of energy for you. So this is my chart. So you can see in mine, I'll give you some examples. So this is the throat center, or where you would have your throat chakra. So to anyone that's around me that knows me, my throat center is active. So it means that I am really great at communicating and expressing myself verbally. Also, people that have a hard time talking are going to resonate towards me, to use me as a person to speak for them. So it would not be uncommon for someone, which it's not at all. And I have a great story with this one. I have a coworker that had an issue going on with an auditor. And so instead of telling anybody about it, she didn't feel comfortable speaking up. So she came and told me. And after she did, she was actually cognitively aware that she did this, but her response was, I came and told you because I knew you would do something about it. And she was right, I did. And the auditor actually got excused from our company. He got escorted out of the building for what he had said to her, but that's kind of how that is. So you gravitate towards people that have these centers defined if yours is not. So here's another one. For me, my will center is very defined. And that means that I have the ability to have immense amounts of willpower. And anybody that's around me will know that. And I try to always tell people, because I do keto, and I've been doing it for 3 years. It was something I started after my last baby, and I just struggled so much with my weight, and nothing, age is a culprit. Nothing that I had done before was working. And so I was like, I'm just going to try this keto thing. And if people were like, oh, it's great to lose some weight, but you can't stick with it because it's so difficult. And now I've done keto for 3 years. And so when people are like, oh my gosh, and they beat themselves up because they're like, I've tried this, or I've tried this diet, or whatever, I always tell them, like, look, I understand myself, and I know my willpower is completely full. Like, I don't have that problem of when I start something that I have a tendency to not do it. It just comes really easy for me. So don't beat yourself up that, it's not working for you. But also, I'm a great person to coach with if somebody's working on their weight, or they want to do keto, or whatever they want to do, because they can feed off of my willpower. And it helps them to feel like that energy of like, oh yeah, I can get up this morning. And, that's why I do things like I post on my Facebook page every morning, because I try to give some of that to everybody else to feed off of.
And Amy, let me tell you, you do, and we appreciate it very much.
Thank you.
I absolutely love your posts. It's like, yes, let's go. So bless you.
That's the other thing that you'll see. I've had business coaches tell me, they're like, oh, you need to focus on like one thing, like focus on a niche for yourself. And I'm like, if you follow my page, you're going to see moments where I'm incredibly spiritual. You're going to see moments where I'm incredibly sarcastic. You're going to see moments where I'm incredibly goofy, crazy, because that is my absolute loving my authentic self, because it's incorporating all of this. Yeah. In some moments I am incredibly spiritual and connected. In other moments I'm goofing around and, being whatever. It's all about not forcing yourself to be something you're not.
You're unique.
Right. So I'm going to give you some examples of how cool this stuff is. So I'm going to go back to this space. So here are the gates. The gates are the numbers. Okay. And you'll see, like, for instance, on my throat chakra, gate 20 is active. And so is my entire channel down to gate 57. So this entire channel is active. So that means something in and of itself. And you can tell this is where it gets really cool, because each one of these means something. Now, let's find another one. Let's say for myself, because I have a gate that's 14 that is active, but the other side of it, gate 2, isn't. So I will be very drawn to a person who has the opposite in their chart to fill this in. And that person will feel very comfortable for me. So that's the other thing that I love about this, right? You stop second guessing when you meet someone and you're like, oh, don't force yourself. There's a reason why you don't feel comfortable around them. It's nothing wrong with you and it's nothing wrong with them. You're literally not a good energy match. So don't force relationships. Then you'll see too, we have different colors. We have black and we have red lines. And depending on where you run your chart, this is going to look slightly different, but just know that the black lines, so this channel that I have right here, 20 to 34, this is something that I'm very cognitively aware that I do. Whereas a line that is red, that is a subconscious thing that I do. So I probably am only aware that I do it because someone has told me that I do. Now, anywhere that you see an overlap means that I have two separate things going on. I have a part of that I do subconsciously, and I also have another thing that I do that is also cognitively, I'm aware of it. So that's where you'll see different colors. So it kind of just helps you understand anywhere that's colored in, those are energies that I'm not going to change. Anywhere that's black, those are energies I'm very aware that I do. Anywhere that's red, those are things that my subconscious is doing, and I'm not necessarily always aware of it. Okay, so let me give you an example. So this is the channel of connecting. So it means that we're in the chart where number 6 is and where number 10 is, that you would see both of them active and both of them would be colored in, and it makes a complete channel. So 6 and 59, I think I said 10, but anyway, so this is what it means. If you see this in your chart, it means that you have the capability, when you're following your strategy, listening to your authority that we talked about, and doing that, you have really deep spiritual connections. You're very passionate. It's really difficult to stop you once you get going. But this is my favorite part about this one, happens to be one of my channels. Your aura will irritate people that have unresolved issues. So I used to just absolutely beat myself up because I was like, why do some people not like me? And I had this like big thing where I had this inner desire for everyone to like me, and it really bothered me if someone didn't. And so this was a real big breakthrough moment for me with my own design, is that I realized that, wow, you know, there are certain people that I'm around that literally my energy is irritating to them. It almost is like an energy shock to them. If the more unresolved issues that person has and the further away that person is from being their authentic self, the more they dislike me. And so I learned to never take that personally. So I now realize, like, I have people that come into my presence and they absolutely love me. And I have other people that come into my presence and they absolutely despise me. And that was really confusing for me at first when I started into, especially into like energy work. I was like, why, how can some people love me and they're praising me and telling me how I'm literally, you know, saving them from, you know, all their evils, and other people that are like, you're so fake, I can't watch you on Facebook, I hate everything you're doing. And it was difficult because I was like, how is this possible? And then I realized, wow, no, you're not for me, go away, because you have, you know, and our auras are just not connecting. And so I learned to appreciate that I am not for everyone, and I am totally aligned and okay with that. I used to argue with people that would post things on my social media that were not in alignment with what I had posted. Like if somebody was arguing with me, and now I just delete their comment. I don't care. I don't get into an argument. I don't message them. I don't try to justify my opinion. I just delete their comment. And, you know, usually people will go post it like 3 or 4 more times, and I just delete it again. And then if they decide to engage in like conflicting energy with me, I don't. I just unfriend them, block them, whatever, because I'm not for everyone. And my goal here is not to convince people to believe or follow or be aligned with whatever. I don't need to. Like that person is not for me. Here's another one. So this is the will center that I talked to you about. You have, and if you have this defined, you have unlimited willpower. You undefined people just have a really hard time sticking with it on their own. Okay. So that's the key right there, on their own. Because sometimes you see this and you're like, oh, if my will center isn't filled in, that means I will never be able to accomplish anything. No, you just have to learn that you are going to need to be around someone, a coach, a partner. Like maybe you decide you want to go walking every morning. Cool. If your will center isn't defined, I highly recommend that you find a walking partner whose will center is defined, because they're going to be the ones that you feed off of just immediately is going to help you get out of bed in the morning to be like, oh, I'm going to go walking with him. Like, you're not even going to know that you're doing it, that you're feeding off of their willpower. So it's not that you can't do it. It's just that you have to have a little strategy behind it. This one relates to digestive issues. So when we're not following, we can have lots of problems with our digestive. So willpower, you either have it or you don't, which is way different than what everybody else is teaching, of where you're like, no, just get out of your comfort zone. Everyone can do this. Well, the problem is, if you do that, guess what you're doing? You're way overstressing your system. And that's when you have problems with your digestive, is because you're running your will center differently than it's meant to be by pushing yourself out of your comfort zone when you're not meant to do that. And then you're going to have all kinds of stuff going on. You're going to have issues digesting and all kinds of stuff going on. Here's another really cool thing that happens with children and parents. So this is not like where we think of, oh, well, I have blue eyes and so does my spouse, and so my kid should have blue eyes. That's not how human design works. You're all incredibly unique. You do not pass your human design off onto your children. There are other things about you that you do, but just because I have a defined throat center doesn't mean my kids will. If you put two people with defined throat centers together and they have a children, doesn't mean the child has a defined throat center. So it doesn't work like that. So here's a couple of things. Depending on your design, some people wake up in the morning and they have a specific amount of energy. It's like a gas tank that they can use during the day. And so we tend to label kiddos that have this going on with kids that can't pay attention. We say they have attention deficit disorder, all kinds of stuff. But really, if we focused on allowing the child to burn that energy off every single day, they would be fine. It's just that they have a lot to burn off. And if we don't allow them to burn it off, when they go to bed at night and they're not exhausted and they carry that into their sleep, they don't sleep at night. Then they wake up and they're exhausted. And then we create this really yucky cycle, because now they're exhausted, they're not sleeping, and they have a ton of energy, right? Sounds pretty close to what a lot of kids are dealing with. And so we almost, as parents, just not understanding that's how our child is, we're just making it worse. Parents can cause their kids to overthink. So if you go back and think about the design chart, we have centers, just like we do chakras in our crown and our mind. So if you are a child with an undefined mind center and a parent with a defined mind center, so they're opposite. So the parent is defined and the child is undefined. The parent is actually downloading thoughts into their kid that they're not even aware that they're doing. And the child is asking questions over and over and over and over and over. And then the parent is getting mad at the kid for asking so many questions, when it's actually the parent who's downloading the desire for the child to ask the questions. And so understanding this type of stuff helps us as parents to be like, okay, I'm overstimulating my kid's mind. And so it helps us to be aware, and we don't get frustrated with our kid, and we learn how to kind of help them out so they're not just constantly trying to overthink. Also comes with kids about telling versus asking. So some kids need to be told and some kids need to be asked. And if you just use the proper wording by saying, hey, I need you to stop. I need you to stop putting your bicycle. I don't know why this is popping up for me. Like, think about your garage door, right? Your garage door has a sensor on it. So, maybe your kid likes to drop their bike right in the middle of the garage door. So every night when you go to shut it, your kid's bike's in the way. And just after a while, you're frustrated. So if you say, hey, some kids need to be asked, I need you to stop leaving your bicycle where the garage door sensors are, because when I go to shut the door, it senses the bike and the garage doors won't close. And then that child will stop doing it. But other children need to be asked or versatile. I think I just told you a telling example, but it's just thinking about how you're wording things, because some kids need to know, like, hey, when you, so you don't ask them, you say, when you leave your bicycle laying right here, the garage door won't close. And that's how you resonate with them, because they pick that up and they're like, oh, okay, I need to not leave my bicycle there. But other kids, if you were to word it like that, you wouldn't get a response. But that same kid, if you say, stop leaving your bicycle right here, the door isn't shutting, They're not going to listen. And then as a parent, you're like, do you not understand? Like, I just told you to stop leaving your bike there. It's all just based off of their design and how you word things. So there we go. I know that's a lot of stuff.
Just wow. I have a lot of questions. Everybody, if you have questions, please ask. If you don't know, perhaps, per se, you have somebody and they do not know what time they were born and cannot find out, how much does that play in with the human design?
So that is definitely something that you can work around. I'm going to stop sharing my screen just because I have a couple of things that I just want to make sure I covered everything. So I'm going to give it back to you while you're doing questions. So that's a great question. A couple of things. Usually, if you can figure out, well, some people don't know, first of all, that a lot of times your time of birth, I was like, what am I trying to say? Your time of birth is on your birth certificate. I actually didn't know that until I was looking at human design, and I was like, oh, it is on there. So time of birth is on your birth certificate. And sometimes if it's not there, and you can call the hospital that you were born at and they can look it up and tell you. But if the other thing too is like actually asking a family member, you'd be surprised at how many people's parents, especially their moms, are like, oh yeah, you were born at 8:35. Like some people just know that. And so I always say like, those are the things to try first. Now, if you're like, I can't get that information, I have no idea. Is what I usually do in that instance is I will run their chart at multiple times during the day just to see how different it changes. And usually the really high level stuff is going to stay the same. So the type and the strategy and the authority is all going to be the same. And it's usually kind of like the more in-depth stuff that sometimes changes. And sometimes it doesn't change at all because it just sort of depends. So that's kind of what I always say is it can be worked around. We just run it multiple times just to see how it is a little different. And then usually the person that is, that you're doing it for, they sometimes can pick up on it and be like, ooh, this is kind of like, I'm really resonating with this. I think this is the one that's closest to my time.
Okay. I've even muscle tested for some people.
Yeah. Yep. That's something that you can do too, muscle testing. So usually with one of those, you can come up with and get pretty close.
So do you have a special place? I know there's several, when I looked up my human design, there's several places to go. So what is the best one to actually utilize to get your human design? Does it matter? Are they about virtually the same or no?
They will pull up exactly the same chart.
Okay.
It just is dependent on kind of how it's configured. Let's just see if I have a couple in here, but I'm not sure if I do right off. It's just going to be more of how that specific software system pulls it out. But so if you run it on somebody's website that offers like a free service, if you do it on multiple websites, you should be getting the same thing. It's just going to look a little different. Okay. Some of the human body or some of the body graphs are just a little different, but they all, and I've done it, I've gone around and done it just to see, but I would say that I'm just going to look and see if I can recall right off, but no, they all run the same chart.
Okay, good. It was rather confusing. It was very interesting. You explained it beautifully. I've never had anybody come on here and explain things like you just did. I thank you very kindly for that. You came right down to our level to where everybody could actually understand what you're saying.
You're so welcome, because I mean, that's definitely like one of my passions. It's just, okay, how do I unmuddle this so that it's understandable? Because otherwise it can be very, very it can be very high level and very overwhelming. And that's why I try to tell people, like, don't try to digest the whole thing. Start at the top. You know, and I didn't talk too much about the strategies, but like the manifester, their strategy is to they manifest something, and then they should tell people what they're doing, but they don't have to align with the opinions that people give them. So let's go back to the job thing, and I'll give you that example. Okay. If a manifester decides to wake up in the morning and they're like, I'm going to quit my job today, that's just the kind of how they do stuff. Their authority is to tell people. They'll have the tendency to just walk into work, pack their box, and leave. If they go in, their strategy is going to be like, hey, I'm going to let everybody know, hey, I've decided that I'm quitting my job. This just isn't where I want to be anymore. And that's how they align. They don't have to listen to people say, no, stay, but they'll create less resistance if they just tell people as they're going. Generators, they have to wait for their opportunities to come to them, which can be kind of hard for them. So they have this ability to pull things into them. So as soon as the opportunity comes to them, then they can act on it, but they can't, like the manifester can go out and do that. The generator has to wait for the opportunity to come to them. So if a generator goes out and tries to make it happen, they're just going to be met with resistance. They wait for the opportunity. Their magnetic monopole is what we call it, will actually gravitate and pull the opportunity to them. So they have to wait for it to come.
That is interesting. So how much does the law of attraction play in this? It does not at all, does it?
It would, so yes, but no, because you basically learn. That's a really in-depth question. It does, because you use the law of attraction. I'm trying to think of like a good example that I could give you for this. So it still does, because, you know, for myself, like I'm the type of, well, I'm a manifesting generator, so I can manifest and then also bring whatever it is that I'm trying to do. But let's say that you are a generator. You still can use the law of attraction to go into the space of the now, to align yourself with being able to receive opportunities. You just wouldn't want to like run out screaming in the street saying, I'm looking for a new career. Does that kind of make sense?
Yes.
Like you can still align yourself using the law of attraction to get into that space where you're attracting things to yourself, but you just don't want to like necessarily go knock on the neighbor's door and be like, hey, I'm looking for a job. Like that's not how a generator works.
Okay.
Generator would, you know, wait for that to come to them. But you can, I like to think of it as like you kind of put out the seeds, like not necessarily that you're not doing anything, but going and looking at your human design on a really, really micro level, you would know like some of the other things that you should be doing. But that's a really in-depth question. But yeah, everything overlaps, right? It's just learning how to use it right.
Right. So if someone per se was caught in a loop and they went through their human design, would that kind of show them where they are getting caught at so they can bring it around to fruition?
Yes, especially if you know, they're really aware. I mean, some people aren't. They're just like, I don't understand why I'm back in this space. Right. And you know from this work, it can be multiple things, but it can definitely help to clear up the, okay, I see why I'm doing this. And stop like trying to resist something that's taking you back to that space like over and over again.
Okay. Does anybody have any questions? Please don't hesitate to unmute and ask away. Everybody's not. Please do. Don't be afraid. Okay. Do you have any further comments, Amy? I'm sure we'll have tons of questions when we get off of here. And, oh, I should have asked this, or I should have asked this, or I should have done this.
Yeah, and I'm always happy to answer even after. So
would you please tell everybody how they can get a hold of you?
Yes. So a couple of ways. I'm always happy to, if you're on Facebook and you want to send me a friend request, so you can find me on there. It's just Amy Thain Jorgensen. Um, and then also, if it's just easier, you can just go to my website. It's blockedemotions.com. And then, of course, that just has all my links to everything.
Okay, beautiful, beautiful. We cannot thank you enough for your kindness in explaining this so well. It's just, whew, there's a lot of work to be done.
I so appreciate the opportunity to be here with you.
Oh, I love it. Maybe you can come back and talk to us about the inner child. You have a lot of awesome things going on.
Yeah. Yeah. That would be great.
Everybody, if we would like to close, please, if you would just bow your head for me and let's give grace, please. Heavenly Father, we thank you so kindly for bringing Amy to us and blessing us with her knowledge. And I pray that everyone is open and blessed and can accept this knowledge, for they can grow intuitively where their road leads them. We thank you for you looking over us and watching and making sure we are safe. We bless you and we bless everyone here tonight. Thank you. Thank you very much, Amy.